So we have two breaking news stories for you, starting with the Supreme Court ruling in favor of President Trump and a blow to Democrats. He is now allowed to deport migrants to third world countries. And secondly, the president announced a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Iran. And we also get to hear from the vice president on what his thoughts were about that.
The Supreme Court has weighed in on a significant part of the president's immigration and deportation policy. CNN's chief legal affairs correspondent, Paula Reed, joins us now with more. Paula, we understand this decision relates to the administration's attempts to deport people to countries other than the country that they are from. What are we learning?
That's exactly right, Casey. A significant win for the Trump administration. Here, the high court allowing them to resume deporting migrants to countries other than their homeland. And we're talking about some sort of turmoil-ridden countries like South Sudan, because a lower court judge had ruled that the Department of Homeland Security had to provide migrants written notice about where they were going and give them an opportunity to challenge that deportation on the ground that they could face torture or other adversity. Now, this lower court judge also said that deporting these individuals to third-party countries without due process unquestionably violated their constitutional protections. But now, while this litigation continues to play out, the Supreme Court allowing the administration to continue sending these migrants to third countries. And roughly 1 million people now are eligible to be deported to these other countries.
Okay, so let's understand exactly what happened here, why it's a huge win for President Trump, and why it is a blow to Democrats. The Supreme Court has confirmed once again that President Trump has the authority, the executive power to deport migrants back to their homeland. And when that cannot happen because the homeland refuses to receive them, also known as repatriation, he can deport them to another country. This is exactly what should have happened with the Abrego Garcia case. As we know, he's back in our country. He might get convicted and waste more tax dollars in our prison before he goes back to his country. Now, listen to this quote from Justice Thomas, which I was surprised. The executive branch cannot be held hostage by foreign governments unwilling to repatriate their citizens. When the safety of the American people is at stake, the president has not only the power, but the duty to act decisively. Now, let's hear about the three justices who dissented, which are liberal, and what they had to say. Take a listen.
The court did not really give a lengthy explanation of their analysis, but there is a pretty fiery dissent from the liberal justices, written by Justice Sotomayor, who wrote, quote, "Rather than allowing our lower court colleagues to manage this high-stakes litigation with the care and attention it plainly requires, this court now intervenes to grant the government emergency relief from an order it has repeatedly defied. I cannot join so gross an abuse of the court's equitable discretion." She goes on to say that the court's decision to grant the government equitable relief is not the first time the court closes its eye to noncompliance, nor, she writes, I fear, will it be the last. So clearly, she is not happy with this decision.
Well, that is to be expected. Now, before we move forward, if you guys have been getting value from our channel and this video in particular, please like, share, and subscribe. You can also listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And don't forget, if you want to support us further, go to the link in the description below. You can buy us a cup of coffee or shop our merch store. Okay, she talks about non-compliance, but what about President Biden, who clearly was non-compliant by allowing millions upon millions of migrants to cross the border illegally? That's the first thing. But more importantly, the second thing, you see how she's crying about lower court judges and the fact that they should be able to manage this crisis. In my own personal opinion, they can't manage this crisis because they're blinded by tribalism. And that's why the biggest development that's going to come from the Supreme Court, either over the next couple of weeks before they go to their break, or by the end of this year, is going to be how far are we going to allow these district court judges to issue nationwide injunctions in a matter that we've never seen before. Now, of course, CNN did bring that point up. Take a listen.
Paula, this is, of course, the final very end of the term for the Supreme Court. What are we still waiting on from them this year?
Casey, it's a great question, because one thing this case does is it combines two of the big themes of this year's Supreme Court term, the immigration power of the president and also the power of lower court judges to block things the administration is trying to do. And really the biggest outstanding question from the justices right now is an opinion on the power that one judge anywhere in the country can block an administration policy for the entire nation, so-called nationwide injunctions. This question comes about connected to President Trump's effort to limit birthright citizenship. That is the biggest case that we're watching. We expect we will likely get it over the next 10 days. We're also looking at other cases, for example, the parents' rights to opt out of LGBTQ curriculum in schools, and then another one about minors accessing porn in Texas. So we're hopefully going to get those decisions in the next 10 days.
So needless to say, these decisions are going to be profound and definitely have a huge impact on the current administration as we know it. And I just can't wait to see what they have to say, especially the liberal justices, if they do rule in favor of President Trump. And now we can go to our next story, which is also breaking news. And you probably have heard it at this point that Iran did retaliate in regards to America taking out their nuclear sites. They launched 6 ballistic missiles towards Qatar because that's where one of our military bases are located. And in the end, it wasn't actually what it sounds like. They did not launch these missiles in an effort to injure or destroy American resources, equipment, property, or even American soldiers. They did it because they had to from a symbolic point of view. And that's exactly what happened when President Trump assassinated Soleimani back in 2020. Now, why don't we hear more details on this? And then we're going to get into the reactions from both sides. Let's start here.
But right now, it looks like we've seen the interceptor missiles fired up over Doha, Qatar, into the night sky, and no evidence yet that any of those missiles have landed on their targets.
Yeah, I mean, it's crossing over Reuters as well right now that the Qatar air defenses intercepted this missile attack on the U.S. military base there.
Yeah, so in the end, nobody was hurt, nobody was injured, property was not damaged. It was a symbolic reason for Iran to respond. They had to do something. It doesn't mean they actually had to escalate this conflict. And that's why they gave President Trump and our government a heads up before they did this. That's the first thing. Secondly, which is also breaking, according to President Trump, a ceasefire deal has been reached. Let's read that now. Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire. And upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption, keyword assumption, that everything works as it should, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran. God bless the Middle East. God bless the United States of America. And God bless the world. Okay, so that is huge news.
Seconds ago, the president went to Truth Social and typed this. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. Complete and total ceasefire is what he typed.
Yep.
What does that mean? How did it come about? What's the development here?
Well, we were actually working on that just as I left the White House to come over here. So that's good news that the president was able to get that across the finish line. I think what it means, Brett, is quite simple. First of all, the president, without, knock on wood, having a single American casualty, obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. We are now in a place where we weren't a week ago. A week ago, Iran was very close to having a nuclear weapon. Now, Iran is incapable of building a nuclear weapon with the equipment they have because we destroyed it. So that's a very, very big thing. Now, what that means, I think, is we have to talk to Iran and, of course, to Israel about what the future holds. Because while we have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, our hope and our expectation is that they're not going to try to rebuild that program. And I think that's what the president is really trying to figure out here, is to build a long-term settlement here to where we can have peace in the region, where our regional allies and, of course, the American people, most importantly, can be secured, but where we can ensure that the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program that has already happened is not something they try to rebuild.
Okay, now, as I said on my live the other night, they will rebuild. Okay? They're not going to stop. It's in their blood. Okay? Now, I'm not talking about people who live in Iran who are just citizens who aren't really caught up in this madness. I'm talking about the government, the people who are in charge of these countries. They won't stop. But this will slow them down. Again, if the intelligence is true, and we did obliterate their nuclear sites, and it did stop them currently from advancing. And even if I'm wrong, and they never were close to it, the bottom line is this: they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. And that's exactly what President Trump wanted. And that's what he wanted while he is the president of the United States. And no matter what side you fall on, you want the president to be successful in the decisions that he makes. So if this holds and the ceasefire actually happens and the war comes to an end and there's no more fighting, this is a huge vindication for President Trump and all the people who continue to call not only for his impeachment, but they're looking to pass pieces of legislation to stop him from making further military actions. Now let's hear Scott Jennings make the point on vindication. Take a listen.
Of course, I told you yesterday I didn't think we were at war and that this represented a de-escalation of the situation. And that's exactly where we are with this flaccid Iranian response. In the words of the great boxer Roberto Duran, no mas, no mas. That's what Iran is saying after Israel has degraded their military capabilities and the president of the United States has taken away their ability to make nuclear weapons. This is capitulation, in my opinion, from Iran today. And it is a complete and total vindication of the Trump strategy, which was to let Israel beat these guys to a pulp. We show up and take away their nukes. Yes, let's have a deal now. I think it'd be great to have a deal with Iran about right now.
Yeah, little did Scott Jennings know that this ceasefire deal would be announced after he said those statements. But I agree with him. This is a total vindication of President Trump if the ceasefire holds. And you hear me say the word if because things change so quickly, right? They can easily go back on this and an agreement cannot be reached. And Iran can continue to try to attack U.S. armed forces or Israel. We'll see what happens, okay? But the bottom line is this: we want this to come to an end, and America wants to move on and focus on things that are important, like, I don't know, inflation, our economy, jobs, etc. Now, unfortunately, Democrats, they're not thinking that way either. They want to stop the President Trump from making any decision regarding military action and are also seeking his impeachment. Unfortunately for them, the facts are not on their side, and I'm going to show it to you right now. But let's first hear the lies from Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Schumer, then I'll show you the truth.
Donald Trump and his actions, which do not appear to be consistent with the United States Constitution, takes unilateral offensive military action without seeking the approval of the United States Congress. The use of military force, which is offensive in nature, must be approved by the House and the Senate. That's according to the Constitution. It's not optional, Donald. It's not.
So, Madam Speaker, or Madam Leader, you're saying that the president did not need authorization initially and still does not need any authorization from Congress on Libya?
Yes.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you all very much.
So in the end, I showed you that clip from Nancy Pelosi where she clearly confirmed the president did not need authorization. Even after the operation, he still did not need authorization to order military airstrikes in that region. Now we know that not only is former President Obama the deporter-in-chief, now what they're calling him is the bomber-in-chief. I mean, there's no comparison. And that's not the only example where you see hypocrisy, double standard, and just pure lying. On Fox News this morning, they showed the history of how every president said the same thing that President Trump said. The only difference, President Trump did something about it. Take a listen.
Democratic presidents have promised in what President Trump actually did. You can see this here. Clinton, as all of you know, Iran needs to meet its energy needs. And then he goes on to say Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Obama, I've stated Iran will never be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. Biden, we will not, let me say it again, not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. President Trump, the first president who was actually able to stand in front of a camera and say Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. The first three have one thing in common, words. The fourth one has an action.
And what's fascinating is President Trump is still moving at a speed that Democrats can't keep up with. Even in this particular situation, they cannot run to a district court judge to stop the president from what he is doing. And so this war might actually get wrapped up in the next 24 hours before they're able to even bring anything to a vote and stop the president from ordering any other military airstrikes. Now, here is Chuck Schumer doing the same song and dance on the Senate floor earlier. Take a listen.
Madam President, earlier today, we received reports that Iran has targeted U.S. military bases and U.S. service members in the Middle East, putting the lives of thousands of Americans at immediate risk. I join Americans. I pray for their safety. This afternoon, I asked the Trump administration to immediately provide a classified briefing laying out the full threat picture, the intelligence behind Iran's retaliation, and the detailed scope and timeline of any U.S. response. More importantly, I've demanded they lay out exactly what measures they're taking right now to keep our service members safe. As I said Saturday night, Congress and the American people are owed answers.
Okay, so that's why I call it the same song and dance, because it's a reality TV show, the desperate Democrats of Congress, right? They're literally contrarians at this point. They're not offering any substance, alternative solutions, any pragmatic approaches, nothing except complaining like we're in high school. Now, what's interesting about what they had to say, Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Schumer, and including CNN and other media outlets that had to retract the statement that President Trump did not consult with Democrats. Even I put that in my video a couple of days ago. In fact, it was all false. And here is the White House press secretary saying that to Fox News earlier this morning. Take a listen.
We did make bipartisan calls. Thomas Massie and the Democrats, he should be a Democrat because he's more aligned with them than with the Republican Party. We're given notice. The White House made calls to congressional leadership. They were bipartisan calls. In fact, Hakeem Jeffries couldn't be reached. We tried him before the strike and he didn't pick up the phone, but he was briefed after, as well as Chuck Schumer was briefed prior to the strike. So this notion that CNN ran with at the White House did not give a heads up to Democrats is just completely false. In fact, both Senator Schumer's office and CNN had to retract that story last night because it was a blatant lie. And we showed them the timestamps from those phone calls. But I want to add something to Thomas Massie's false point. The White House was not obligated to call anyone because the president was acting within his legal authority under Article 2 of the Constitution as Commander-in-Chief of the President of the United States. We gave these calls as a courtesy, and the Democrats are lying about this because they can't talk about the truth of the success of that operation and the success of our United States military and the success of this president and this administration in doing something that past administrations, Democrats too, have only dreamed about.
And what's interesting about what she said is CNN had to do a retraction. So clearly, Hakeem Jeffries, Senator Schumer, Democrats, they were notified. And it's fascinating that they're still going out there and lying to people's faces that they were not, including the whole thing that, you know, what President Trump is doing is unconstitutional. Before we even get into the debate of whether it was right or wrong, because I'm sure people are going to argue about that till they're blue in the face. Some people want to drop President Trump because he moved in this direction. I don't even have energy to debate with people on that because there is no convincing them. They've made up their mind, which is why on this particular issue on whether or not it was unconstitutional, I think is a better debate to take place because clearly not only can we prove that these individuals are wrong, but we have the facts to back it up. Now, here is probably the only Democrat who publicly has been coming out in support of what President Trump is doing, is not afraid to do it. That is Senator Fetterman. Take a listen.
There's going to be a lot of people in my party that are going to disagree with the strike in Iran. And I actually support that. I've been always calling for that thing. I think it was entirely appropriate. And again, there might be votes on that. So for me, that's not a war. That was a very limited military exercise, and it struck that. And then that's where we're at. So really, it really wasn't about unconstitutional or it's anything like that.
Yeah, I think at this point, you're very clear on how Senator Fetterman feels about President Trump in regards to Israel and the decisions that he's been making. So no shocker there. However, it still leaves us with some problems from people on the right as it pertains to how they feel about President Trump and his decision making. One, on his comments about a regime change in Iran, which I'm about to show you a clip from what the vice president had to say about that. And of course, two, that people are still not sold on this ceasefire announcement from the president. They're not buying one bit of it. But first, let's hear what the vice president had to say.
Well, I think what the president is saying very clearly, Brett, is if the Iranian people want to do something about their own leadership, that's up to the Iranian people. What the American national security interest here is very simple. It's to destroy the nuclear program. That's what we've done. And now that the 12-day war appears to be effectively over, we have an opportunity, I think, to restart a real peace process. And Brett, this is not just about two countries, Iran and Israel. All of these Gulf Arab states, they want peace. They want to invest. They want to build artificial intelligence hardware. They want to sort of come into the new economy. And that was impossible when you had Iran that was, as the president said, acting like a bully across the Middle East. We really think that if the Iranians are smart about the path forward, this could be a new dawn of an economic age of prosperity, of course, for our Gulf Arab allies, for us, for the Israelis, for everybody. But it's going to require the Iranians play it smart from here.
And in the end, we're going to need to see public acknowledgments from Israel and Iran in regards to this ceasefire agreement, because even though President Trump has announced it, we have not heard from those countries. Now, there are already reports saying that they have agreed and that they've seen it. And then there are reports saying they haven't seen it. You guys know how this game goes. And that's why I tell you guys, when breaking news happens, I like to refrain from actually talking in detail about it. I just want to cover just the bottom line to it first, because it still needs to develop. We still have not heard from these other countries. So that remains to be seen. And we're still technically 24 hours out from this war ending. And I hope that it does. So let's hear from you guys in the comment section below to two of these big stories in this video today. First, with the Supreme Court once again ruling in favor of President Trump as it pertains to his authority to deport migrants who cannot go back to their homeland, but he can deport them to a third world country. One, do you agree with the ruling? And what's your reaction to the liberal justices who believe this is the court turning a blind eye to what they would call a non-compliance from the administration? And then secondly, this huge development from President Trump that a ceasefire agreement has been made and the war will end within the next 24 hours. Let me know what you guys think about all that in the comment section below.